Listen to the audiobook Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. Level B1. Oxford Reading University.
You will find Part 1 in the description and on our channel. Part 2.
Then he turned around and went back to that young lady. Elinor asked a friend to drive them home. Marianne was clearly unwell. She was pale as a ghost and couldn't stand on her feet. She quickly entered the house, ran into her bedroom, and threw herself on the bed. She cried violently all through the night. Early in the morning, she wrote her last letter to Willoughby. Before lunch, his reply arrived. It said, "Dear Madam, I apologize if I did anything yesterday that hurt your feelings. I will always remember my visits to your family with great pleasure, but I hope I have never made you or any of your relatives think that I consider you something more than just a friend. I must tell you that I am engaged and will soon marry. I return your letter and the lock of hair that you once gave me so kindly." Elinor couldn't believe it. How could he? She took her sister in her arms and kissed her softly. "It is better that you have escaped a connection with such a horrible man," she said. "I'm glad that you were only engaged and not married." "Engaged?" cried Marianne. "We weren't engaged." "What? But surely he told you that he loved you." "Well, he never said it openly, but I saw it in his eyes," replied Marianne. "And that lock of hair that he mentioned in the letter, he asked me for it. He cried and convinced me that it was very important to him." Marianne cried for several days. Elinor was seriously worried about her mental health. She did everything she could to calm and support her sister. Later, she learned that Willoughby was going to marry a certain Miss Grey, a rich lady from a noble family. But still, Elinor hoped that it was all for the best. 10. Soon, everybody knew about Marianne and Willoughby's situation. Colonel Brandon was worried about Marianne and came to check on her immediately. The girl was in her room, crying. As the Colonel and Elinor sat together in the living room, he said, "I feel very sorry for poor Marianne. She's very dear to me, and so is your family. Let me prove my friendly feelings by telling you a story." "You wish to tell me something bad about Willoughby?" guessed Elinor. "I must tell you something about myself first," he said. "I was once deeply in love with a woman, Eliza. Unfortunately, she was forced to marry my brother, and I was sent to join the army. My brother did not treat her like a gentleman, and she was very unhappy in her marriage. Eventually, she left him to live with another man." For a moment, he couldn't speak. Then he went on. "When I returned to London, she wasn't there anymore. I had been searching for her, till one day I found her in a hospital, dying. She had lost everything: her health, her happiness, her beauty, her money, her honor. Eventually, she lost her life too. She had been so young when she had gotten married. If only there had been someone to give her advice. She could have lived a happy life. I was with her in her final moments, and she asked me to take care of her daughter." Elinor listened to him carefully, with her eyes full of tears. "I sent the girl to school and provided a good life for her," continued the Colonel. "Years later, I learned something horrible. She started a relationship with a young man. He wasted all her money and left her." "Could that man be Willoughby?" asked Elinor. "Yes," replied Colonel Brandon. "Now you know what kind of man he truly is. I cannot even imagine what his real intentions toward Marianne were. It was very painful for me to watch your sister fall deeper and deeper in love with him, but I really hope that she will get better soon." Elinor thanked him for his kind words. Soon she told the story to Marianne. Of course, the girl agreed that Willoughby was a dishonest man. But now she was even sadder. The perfect image of Willoughby that she used to have in her mind had disappeared forever. After that, Marianne stopped avoiding Colonel Brandon. She talked to him gently whenever he came to visit, and Elinor was pleased at the sight of them together. 11. One day, the Dashwood sisters were in the living room reading together. Suddenly, their host rushed in, looking very excited. "You won't believe what happened," she cried. "It turned out that Lucy Steele and Edward Ferrars have been engaged for years, and nobody knew about it except Lucy's sister, Anne. She accidentally gave it away to Mrs. Fanny Dashwood, and now everybody knows, even Edward's mother." Elinor's face turned pale. Surely the old lady wasn't happy about it. "Mrs. Ferrars was so mad," the woman went on. "She shouted at her son and tried to persuade him to break off the engagement, but he rejected her. Eventually, Mrs. Ferrars drove Edward out of her house. Can you believe it? She said that he wasn't going to receive any money from her. She decided that his younger brother, Robert, would inherit her fortune." She stopped for a moment, then concluded, "At least he intends to keep his promise to Lucy like an honest man. He refused to break off the engagement, even in a hard situation like that. Poor man." Later, Elinor received a letter from Lucy. In it, she wrote, "My dear Elinor, you are one of the few real friends I have. Everyone has found out about our engagement and turned their backs on us. But it doesn't matter. Indeed, without Mrs. Ferrars's money, Edward and I will probably have a hard time. But as long as we are together, everything will be all right. Thank you for your kindness and for supporting me." Elinor was very sad. She told her sister that she had known about the engagement ever since they left Barton. Marianne hugged her sister and kissed her softly, and they cried together. The Dashwood sisters had been staying in London for 2 whole months already. Marianne missed the peaceful atmosphere of Devonshire very much and couldn't wait to go back home. But before the sisters left, Colonel Brandon came to visit them. "I've heard the latest news," he began. "I'm not quite familiar with Mr. Edward Ferrars, but I met him several times, and he seemed like a nice gentleman. I'd like to help him in his difficult situation. I know that he wants to become a priest. Well, there's a church near my house at Delaford and a small cottage nearby. Of course, he won't have much work there, but at least he will be able to save something for his future life. Please tell him about my offer." Elinor thanked him kindly. Later in the day, she sat down to write a letter to Edward. While she was at it, somebody knocked on the door. It was Edward himself. They were both too embarrassed to look each other in the eyes. Elinor passed the colonel's offer to him, and the man accepted gladly. "He wants to help me even though I'm just a stranger," he thought. "I'm sure it's all because of Elinor. If he is ready to do so much for her, then they are surely more than just friends." Edward looked at her sadly as they said goodbye. Then he left. "Next time I see him, he will be Lucy's husband," thought Elinor. 12. Soon, the sisters left London. The colonel volunteered to keep them company on their long journey. They stopped for a few days at Cleveland, their friend's house that stood halfway between the city and Devonshire. Marianne spent hours walking in a nearby forest, thinking of Willoughby. Eventually, she caught a bad cold and came down with a fever. She slept heavily all through the day and night. She did not even have the strength to open her eyes. Elinor was very frightened, so Colonel Brandon went to bring their mother from Barton. Fortunately, Marianne got a little better the following day. Elinor couldn't wait for their mother to come. At midday, she heard a carriage pull up in the yard. But Mrs. Dashwood and the colonel couldn't possibly come so soon. Elinor went to greet the visitor. She was surprised to see that it was Willoughby. He looked at her shyly and said, "Miss Dashwood, I have something important to tell you. But first, is your sister all right? The servant just told me of her illness." "I have no intention of talking to you," said Elinor coldly, and turned away. "Please, wait!" he cried. "I understand your feelings, but I must explain myself and apologize to Marianne. I've come all the way from London only for this." Elinor looked at him curiously, and he went on. "I don't know if I'm a bad man or a silly one. Indeed, when I came to Devonshire, I didn't plan to fall in love with your sister. Even if I had, I could never have afforded to marry her. but later I realized that I was madly in love. Unfortunately, I needed money, and my aunt, Mrs. Smith, persuaded me to marry Miss Grey. But she didn't love me then, and she doesn't love me now. Oh, I am so stupid." For a moment, Elinor's heart softened for him. "I understand that your sister will never be mine," the young man continued. "I know that I've made her suffer a lot, but believe me, I have punished myself enough for that. Please promise me that you will tell her my story when she gets better. It is very important for me." "I'll tell her," promised Elinor. She felt sorry for him, but in the end, he was the one responsible for all the trouble in his life. Shortly after he left, Mrs. Dashwood and Colonel Brandon arrived. Finally, Elinor was at peace. Slowly, Marianne got better. Soon Mrs. Dashwood found an opportunity to talk to Elinor in private. On the ride from Barton, she told her, the Colonel had declared his love for Marianne. Mrs. Dashwood did not doubt that he was an excellent man and hoped very much that Marianne would be able to admit it eventually. 13. When Marianne recovered, the Dashwoods returned to Barton. At long last, the family gathered together again, and they were very happy. Soon, one of their servants came back from town and announced, "Mr. Ferrars got married. I saw him and Miss Lucy Steele, well, she is Mrs. Ferrars now, in a carriage together outside a hotel." Marianne exchanged quick looks with her older sister, then started crying. A painful smile appeared on Elinor's face. She had lost all hope completely. Some time later, they saw a man riding up to their house through the window. It was Edward. Elinor sat down, trying to calm herself. The man entered the room and greeted everyone in a quiet voice, then stepped backward as if he were frightened. After a long, uncomfortable pause, Mrs. Dashwood asked kindly, "I hope Mrs. Ferrars is well?" "Yes, my mother is fine, thank you," he replied. "I think she means Lucy Ferrars," said Elinor bravely. He gave her a confused look. His face turned red. "You mean Robert's wife?" he asked. "Your brother!" exclaimed Marianne and Mrs. Dashwood together. "Yes," he said. "I guess you are unaware that my brother has married Miss Lucy Steele." Elinor jumped to her feet and rushed out of the room, unable to hide her happy tears. Within the next hour, Edward asked her to be his wife, received a positive answer, and became the happiest man alive. Also, he told her the story of his engagement with Lucy. "Indeed, it was a mistake," he said. "It only happened because I argued with my mother about my profession. I was so mad and confused, and nobody was there to give me advice. So I convinced myself that I was in love. But then I met you, and realized that I had been wrong. I explained everything to Lucy. Soon she wrote me a letter saying that she was going to marry my brother and inherit my mother's fortune with him." Mrs. Ferrars wasn't pleased with her younger son's engagement, but since Robert was her favorite, she couldn't be mad at him for too long. Eventually, she forgave Edward too, and even gave him enough money to start a family with Elinor and live comfortably at Delaford. Her family visited Elinor at her new house all the time, so she rarely felt that they were apart. Both she and Mrs. Dashwood still hoped for Marianne to marry Colonel Brandon. At 17, Marianne used to think that passion was the most essential thing in a relationship between a man and a woman. But now, as she was 19, she admitted that a happy marriage could also be based on the warm feeling of respect and friendship. Eventually, she married Colonel Brandon, the man she used to consider too old for love. She moved in with her husband at Delaford Park, and Elinor lived with Edward in their cottage nearby. Mrs. Dashwood remained with Margaret at Barton, and soon her youngest daughter grew old enough for dances, parties, and falling in love. Elinor and Marianne lived happily with their husbands, and almost within sight of each other. Barton and Delaford remained friendly with each other throughout the years, and time only brought them closer together.
Your support means a lot to us. Hit the like button if you enjoy our audiobooks. and leave a simple comment. It will help others to see our videos. And here's another great story in English for you.